Howdy, folks. Timothy John Evans, I think, is a name that deserves to be remembered, as does Derek Bentley, as does Ruth Ellis. Those three people have one thing in common, and that's that they were amongst the 400 to 600 people that were executed by a man called Albert Pierrepoint, who was a hangman, the most famous British hangman. Now, I was listening to a documentary or something like that, something on the radio perhaps, I'm not sure. Got me thinking anyway over the last couple of days. So I've been meaning to do this video for a little while. Albert Pierrepoint's seen as a bit of a folk hero in a lot of ways, because he revolutionised hanging people, streamlined it. It was said that he could take a man from the condemned cell to the end of a rope in around 9 seconds, something like that. Probably got the number wrong. Some infinitesimally small amount of time anyway. He carried out the executions of numerous Nazi war criminals, hundreds. Most noteworthy of those will be those from the Bergen-Belsen camp, who without a doubt, obviously, had carried out horrific things, and I'm certainly not going to argue that they deserve to continue breathing for doing what they did. However, the names that I mentioned are controversial for a number of reasons. Certainly the first of which, Timothy John Evans, he was executed because he had the misfortune of being the next door neighbour of a man by the name of John Christie, who was the Rillington Place Strangler, a famous serial killer here in the UK. And John Christie was a policeman, a well-respected, upstanding citizen who was beyond reproach, I'm sure. So it was natural to instead accuse the next door neighbour, a man with the mental age of a 14-year-old, for the crimes of somebody else, until it was proven that John Christie had indeed been responsible for those murders, and he was duly executed by Albert Pierrepoint himself. Derek Bentley, controversial because there was so much uncertainty around the crime that he was allegedly, that he was convicted of, I should say. Ruth Ellis, controversial because many say she was suffering from battered woman syndrome and shot her lover because she was not in a fit mental state as a result of being a battered woman. All of these people went to the gallows regardless, and they were all hung by the same man who carried out his duty to the state with utmost professionalism. Now, the reason I got thinking about all of this is because many people would consider that to be a positive trait. Imagine hanging somebody's horrendous job. Somebody's got to do it, right? Well, no, I don't agree. It's one thing to die in combat, and there is a controversy itself. Certainly, I would argue that all of the wars that the UK and the United States have been involved in since World War II have been little more than flexing of empire muscle. Indeed, a friend of mine who's a former parachute regiment told me in as many words that when he was fighting in the Gulf War, last Gulf War, he was very conscious of the fact that he was the fist of the corporations, was the term that he used. How does that relate to Albert Pierrepoint, you may ask yourself, understandably enough. And the reason it got me thinking about all of this is because Albert Pierrepoint was a tool of the state. He was a man who carried out what he was duty bound to do, although in fairness, he could have walked away from doing that job any time he liked. But what it got me thinking about was how there is a tragedy on 2 points, 2 levels. First of all, that we live in a world where our states, our countries, can demand or expect of us to do the unthinkable. Whether you're a hangman or whether you're a soldier. And the second is that there are so many of us who will willingly do it. It's almost like we, as a species, we like to be led by people, by somebody. Doesn't matter who it is. We like to be told what to do. And if somebody says, go and do this, people will do it. And they'll do it without thinking about doing it. They'll just do it because it's their duty to do so. Well, I find this state of human nature quite abhorrent. It is, after all, precisely how countries like Germany or Spain, numerous parts of Latin America, Cambodia, the world over, have consistently been led to do atrocious things by their governments. And I can't respect people for doing that. I cannot. There is a sense of right and wrong. And even as an atheist, a lot of Christians will argue, well, where do you get your moral compass if it's not from God? I'm not going to sit here and discuss theocracy, or theology, I should say, or the philosophy of where morality comes from. But I'm certainly aware of what's right or wrong. And it has nothing to do with religion. But on the subject of the death penalty, I'm going to read you the words of Albert Pierrepoint himself. And I find this very profound because although I don't respect the man for being the automaton that he was, this state executioner, I do respect him. For what he said in later life when he retired. And it was the following. He wrote of hanging. It's said to be a deterrent. I cannot agree. There have been murders since the beginning of time, and we shall go on looking for deterrents until the end of time. If death were a deterrent, I might be expected to know. It is I who have faced them last, young lads and girls, working men, grandmothers. I've been amazed to see the courage with which they take that walk into the unknown. It did not deter them, and it had not deterred them when they committed what they were convicted for. All of the men and women whom I have faced at that final moment convince me that in what I have done, I have not prevented a single murder. I find those very powerful words, especially in the context of the world in which we live today, when a developed nation like the United States can still have the death penalty, when there are so many provable cases of innocent people being executed for crimes they did not commit. And I, for one, am proud of one thing about Great Britain and Ireland, or living in the part of the world that I do anyway, is that we don't have the death penalty here. However, I am deeply ashamed that many of my countrymen would have it back in a heartbeat. And I think this is a sad indictment on the human race. I really do. But more, I think it's an indictment on the human race that we would so willingly give ourselves to our state to carry out execution or massacres of civilians like were done in My Lai. Or the numerous war crimes of which I have absolutely every certainty were committed by British soldiers and American soldiers in the Gulf War, in the Falklands War, in the Afghan War. But anyway, those have been my musings for the last couple of days since listening to that documentary. I bid you farewell and catch you again soon.